Welcome to the Eat Plants, Feel Whole podcast, a program designed to help you harness the healing power of plants and transform your health. I'm your host, Todd Chobotar. I serve as the publisher and editor-in-chief of AdventHealth Press. Today we're talking to lifestyle medicine specialist Dr. George Guthrie about his book, Eat Plants, Feel Whole. Welcome, Dr. Guthrie.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Dr. Guthrie, today I am fascinated to find out more about protein because as someone who has been interested in healthy lifestyle and healthy living from the time that I was a boy, you always hear about protein. It just seems to come up over and over again, particularly as a man, I'll say this, but I think there's plenty of ladies out there that want to know this too. If I want to get healthy, if I want to get strong, if I'm going to eat plants, am I going to be able to get enough protein? Is that even possible?
It's an important question, and I think that we can answer that. Protein means for life. Okay, basic, we would call them kind of the major parts of food: carbohydrates, fats, and protein. Carbohydrates, energy; fat, stored energy; and protein, really structure. And the way it's identified is as having the presence of nitrogen. So it generally comes in chains. So it would be carbon, carbon, nitrogen, carbon, carbon, nitrogen. And each of the kind of branches off of that decides what it's going to do. And that creates structure, whether it's hair or skin or enzymes, or a lot of people are surprised to find out that even bones are about 50% protein.
So clearly
50%.
an important part
Yes.
of the human body. Okay.
I remember in medical school they brought out femur, the kind of leg bone, one which had been treated to remove the calcium, and it bent. It was made up of just the protein. The other one had been treated to remove the protein, and it was like a piece of chalk. You could write it with it on the sidewalk. So, our body, structurally wise, is mostly protein. So we need that. And muscles, of course, need protein. That's the part that we always know. Yeah. Now, it ends up that proteins are made up of amino acids. Okay. Amino means nitrogen. So these amino acids are the little building blocks for proteins, which then fold and create what they're designed to do. So these amino acids, we came to understand within the last 120 years, something like that. And we could, as we understood more about them, we began to understand that there were essential amino acids that we had to have or we would be sick. Okay. And there were others that we could actually make ourselves. And we didn't know about ourselves as humans early because we did our experiments on rats and mice, which are a little easier to find and replicate, and of course not quite as valuable as us humans, at least to the scientific mind at that point. So the early studies were done by a fellow by the name of Dr. Rose. Okay. And he said, we know about rats, we got to find out about humans. And he did something that is now considered very unethical.
In scientific circles? In
scientific circles. Okay. I think in our whole kind of social environment of today, our whole morality has a hard time going in and forcing prisoners to do scientific studies. So he got some prisoners, got permission, and then began to do nitrogen balance studies. So you measure the nitrogen in, you measure the nitrogen out. That's not easy. Every hair that falls off, every piece of mucus, every stool or urine, everything has some protein going along with it. So you have to catch it all. So you get these fellas in their zoot suits trying to catch everything, measuring the nitrogen in and out. And he identified that our basic needs is about 20 grams of protein for every 3,000 calories. Those were his calculations. He tried it a bunch of different ways. So it ends up being about 2.5% of our calories from protein. He went on from there and said, now what about these amino acids, these building blocks? So since he had control of their diet, he would slowly decrease one amino acid at a time in the diet until they began to have symptoms. And then he simply doubled it back up from there and said, okay, that's the lowest amount that we need. So from Dr. Rose's studies, we now know how much protein we quotes need to stay alive. Of course, those were early studies. They've been refined now, and the recommendations are set a little bit higher, but it's still kind of based on that. And for the amino acids and what we need, nobody's really updated that because it's unethical to do those studies. So that's kind of what we know at this point.
So when it comes to amount of protein that we need, we've got a pretty good picture of how much we need.
Right, the very basics.
The basics, okay.
Right. So at present, the recommendations from the federal government are 0.8 grams of protein for every kilogram. And of course, each kilogram is what? You divide pounds by 2.2 to get the kilograms. And we usually talk about the prototypical 70 kilogram male. And it's not the weight you are, it's the weight ideally you should be for your height that this goes on.
Okay.
So that's the way we actually measure it. And that comes out to closer to 57 to 60 grams per day. So for what that's worth, that'll give you a ballpark. But I guess the question is really, can I get enough from plants?
Yes.
Okay, so let's do a little bit of this. And I like this little exercise because it helps us understand, and there's a little bit of an aha at the end. Okay.
All right.
Anything that's alive has to have protein in it. It might surprise you, for example, to know that even lettuce has protein in it.
Would not have known that.
Yeah, but it's alive. It's needed for life. Proteins are needed for life. An orange, you don't think of that as a protein food, but you're talking about 7, 8, 9% of the calories are from protein.
Oh.
If you move to potato, that's 11, 12, somewhere in that range. You move to beans, legumes, they run from about 22 to maybe 25, 26% protein.
Interesting. Now, how does that compare to like animal protein?
That's the same as muscle meat.
Really?
Yes. So beans, 22 to 25%, and of course it depends on just how marbled your meat is, right? How much fat there is in it.
Sure, that makes sense.
And that brings up another interesting point because we can say the meat is lean meat is say 25% protein, right? Well, what are the other calories? Well, they're almost all fat, right? When you go to and that's highly concentrated, which tends to stick to us. When you go to the legumes, the beans, the other calories are actually from complex carbohydrates, kind of all mixed in with the fiber. So as we've talked about before, releases that energy a little bit slower and is a little easier on the body. Now, you might be surprised. Broccoli has about 40% of the calories from protein.
Really?
Now, I didn't say that 40% of broccoli is protein. I said 40% of the calories. Remember, when you're dealing with plant foods, you're talking about a lot of fiber and water,
right,
which technically don't really have a lot of calories in it. It's the carbohydrate, protein, and the fat. Now, each of those foods also has a little fat in them, but it's relatively small. Infinitesimal, as a matter of fact, it seems, compared to what meat products do. So you can see that it's not hard to get an adequate amount of protein. Now, I shared with you, Dr. Rose found 2.5% of the calories.
Right.
And that the recommendation is now around 57 to 60 grams of protein for males. It'd be a little less for females. Protein is, of course, important. When during our lives do you think we might need the highest amount of protein?
Well, I mean, this is just a guess, but if you're talking about protein being sort of part of the structure
and growth,
and growth, it would be generally when you're young, wouldn't it?
Well, that first year of life.
Yeah, you're
Within
growing
the first
fast.
9 to 12 months, you double your weight.
Okay.
So what's the best food for a growing infant?
Mother's milk?
Breast milk.
Yeah.
So what do you think the percent protein calories are in breast milk?
Boy, I have no idea. I would think they'd be pretty high.
5 to 7%.
That's it.
It's really low. And a lot of people are very surprised to hear that. But that's adequate for that baby to grow. As a matter of fact, that's best for that baby to grow. The truth is, we often in this country tend to get too much protein. The average American is eating between 100 to 120, and many guys are eating a lot higher grams of protein a day.
Now, is there a potential problem with that? Because if I'm thinking to myself, and I'm just trying to put myself in the place of others that might be listening today, as well as myself here. So if I'm wanting to, let's say, get stronger, whether it's athletically, physically, if I know that protein is something that's, as you said, important for me, and it's part of the building blocks, then wouldn't more be better?
You know, water is good for you, but you can drown in it. So,
True.
I mean, it makes sense that things that are good for us that too much may be a problem. And indeed, we do have some evidence that too much protein can lead to damage in the body. That is correct. So, for example, we tend to think that we need lots of protein to make strong bones, right? That along with the calcium and strong muscle. What ends up, science tends to indicate that if you take too much protein, you tend to pull calcium out of the bones and there are more fractures. I know I've seen that study done in kids. Actually, it wasn't milk that protected against fractures. It was more fruits and vegetables protected much more than milk did.
Against fractures?
Against fractures.
Huh. So another reason I need to be getting my kids to eat their fruits and veggies.
That's right.
All right. So in talking about protein then, it's important to realize the amount that we need. It's important to make sure that the quality of the protein that we're getting is good. And I hear you saying that plant sources for protein is high quality.
I don't think we've demonstrated that to our listeners
well, tell
yet.
me that then.
So let's go ahead and talk about that.
All right.
Each of these amino acids, and there's a group of them that are essential. Some of them, and they can be paired, so one can turn into the other and actually take the place of the other. But if we take those essential amino acids and we say, are they all present in a food? If they're all present, we would say that would be a high-quality protein. At least that's the way that it's talked about.
Makes sense.
It is, in essence, based on a 100-gram serving, about what'll fit in the palm of your hand, of whatever that food is, that protein-containing food. Does it have all of the amino acids at the levels that Dr. Rose identified as what we need for our essential amino acids?
And that demonstrates a high-quality protein.
That's the way the term has been used.
Okay.
Those in the protein research area now recognize that that's not very helpful. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
If you take 100 grams of beef and you look for the amino acids, they'll all be there. The ones that we need. It's a muscle. You know, they're about the same balance, the same proteins, the same amino acids that's in our muscle, so it ends up being about right. Same thing is true of milk. Same thing is true of eggs, those types of things. When you move over into the plant kingdom, the plant part of eating, we notice that foods are deficient. For example, if you look at soybeans, for example, they are in 100 grams of soybean, there is 1 gram short of an amino acid called lysine. So you would say, well, that soybean is deficient. Wait a minute. That's only if you eat 100 grams. What if you increase that size to 110 grams? Then there would be enough lysine there. The whole concept is built on a serving size, which nobody eats only 100 grams of anything in a day. So it's really not a helpful construct.
I gotcha.
So some people even say, well, you need to mix plant proteins to get your balance. No, you just need to get adequate amounts in. I did a little exercise in this when I was teaching nutrition years ago to some graduate nutrition students. And I got the amino acids, and I said, okay, how many slices of whole wheat bread would it take to get all the amino acids that are required, according to Dr. Rose's studies, which we now understand? I mean, that's where those marks come from. And it ended up being 6.2 slices of bread. That's all you need to get all your essential amino acids. You need a lot more protein than that.
Yeah.
So if you're getting adequate amounts of protein, it's virtually impossible to actually not get all the amino acids. And it doesn't matter whether it was all grains or all legumes or your egg or your beef. I mean, they all provide the essential amino acids. This business of protein quality is really not so important for the average person.
So I can make it just fine by eating plants and still get sufficient amounts of protein.
That is absolutely correct. And if you're eating them, especially whole plants, you'll get all the amino acids you need.
Now, in your book, Dr. Guthrie, you had a quote from, I think it was from Jeff Novak.
Yes.
Who's a registered dietitian.
And friend of mine.
For a friend of yours. Okay, so you quoted a friend of yours. And he says this in the book. He says, when asked, where do I get my protein? He said, I answer, the same place your protein gets its protein, plants.
I like the way he's done that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I've heard others who are kind of wrestling with this also look around. We had a Native American chief that we treated several years ago, and he looked around and he said, if the buffalo can get that big and strong on grass, it should work for me too.
Uh-huh.
And it's true. All those plants have protein in it. The nitrogen is mixed in. We use nitrogen as fertilizer so the plants can make proteins. We eat the plants and we gain the benefit of the amino acids, which the plants have made from the organic nitrogen.
Very good. Well, I think that gives a pretty good summary of the benefits of getting our protein from plant-based sources, as well as the fact that we can get a sufficient quantity from them. Let me just end with this. To me, this was kind of a takeaway quote that I saw in your book. And this one was from Mark Messina, who's a PhD. And he said, when people eat several servings of grains, beans, and vegetables throughout the day and get enough calories, it's virtually impossible to be deficient in protein.
Absolutely correct, and an excellent summary statement.
Yeah? You agree with that then?
Absolutely.
Very good. Any last minute thoughts or takeaways? What's the thing that you would like to leave listeners with today?
Don't worry about protein. Eat the plants. You'll get plenty of it.
Very good. Now, with that, I'm very pleased that you have some giveaways, some bonus material that you talk about in your book, and that folks can go to the website eatplantsfeelwhole.com. And one of the free giveaways that I wanted to highlight was some recipes. So you have 50 recipes in the book that are provided to folks, but you can also go to eatplantsfeelwhole.com and you have additional recipes on there that are beyond recipes that are
That's
even
correct.
in the book. And so folks can download these recipes for free. These are plant-based recipes.
And
yes,
the amount of protein in each one is listed. So you can actually find out for yourself how much protein is there if you really want to check me out and make sure that what I've said is correct.
that's excellent. That's true. Every single recipe has a complete nutritional breakdown there, so you can see how much protein, fats, carbohydrates, everything, and calories, so forth, in each one of those.
We think people will
recipes.
find it helpful.
Good. Well, Dr. Guthrie, thank you very much for sharing that with us today. You've been listening to the Eat Plants, Feel Whole podcast, a limited edition, 15-part series where our goal is to help you to harness the healing power of plants and to transform your health. I've been your host, Todd Chobotar, and if you'd like to find out more about Dr. Guthrie and his work, you can visit eatplantsfeelwhole.com. And if you'd like to discover other great resources to help you feel whole in mind, in body, and in spirit, then please visit AdventHealthPress.com. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter that has healthy living tips, some leadership wisdom, and also regular giveaways. Thanks so much for joining us today.